Part 8. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 71. All these for me to eat? Niu opened her big, bright eyes and looked at Zhang Yuniang and Lu Xiru in disbelief. Lu Xiru nodded vigorously and conjured a bowl of rice out of nowhere. Baby, the most important thing for you now is to eat well, Lu Xiru said with a smile. Niu looked at her, then looked down at the plate of food in front of her. Lu Xiru cut some of all the braised food in her store and put them together to make a braised food platter. Now she placed a plate in front of Niu. Obviously the strong fragrance of the braised meat was constantly stimulating the taste buds, and Niu kept swallowing her saliva because of the delicious taste, but she still did not move her chopsticks immediately, but asked, "Is it just for me, or for the brothers, all?" When Lu Xiru heard Niu ask this question, she couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Niu was indeed a very well-behaved child. If it had been any other child, she would probably not care about anything at this time and only wanted to have a good meal. Lu Xiru wanted the three children to eat here together, but Zhang Yuniang disagreed. As the saying goes, a young man eats a poor man. The two sons have big appetites. These braised meats are not cheap to begin with. If the two sons are given here, they will probably eat up all today's profits. Gu Zhao wanted to rush over and take a bite, but Gu Yan pulled the person away forcefully and said, "You are such a foodie, don't drive the guests away." Gu Zhao wanted to refute, but because he devoured delicious food every time he met him, he seemed unable to deny it, so he could only be dragged into the house by his elder brother. At this time, Lu Xiru said with a smile, "Only Niu can eat it." Niu's beautiful eyebrows frowned slightly and she said, "Then Niu becomes a solitary eater? This is not what a gentleman does." Lu Xiru couldn't help laughing when she heard this and said, "It's amazing, Niu now knows what a gentleman is." Niu said shyly, "Aunt Lu, I actually don't understand what a gentleman is, but every time my eldest brother says that we have done something wrong, he always says that it is not what a gentleman does." Lu Xiru and Zhang Yuniang couldn't help laughing when they heard this. "Niu, this is not Aunt Lu setting up a small stove for you, but Aunt Lu asking you for help. You are a good child, and you must be willing to help Aunt Lu, right?" Lu Xiru was good at tempting. Niu nodded vigorously and said, "Aunt Lu is my favorite aunt. If you have something to do, I will definitely help." Lu Xiru had always been partial to Niu. When she heard this, she was immediately elated. She pushed the braised food platter in front of Niu and urged the little girl to eat quickly. Niu really didn't understand how she could help others by eating their food, but she was also helping others, but Zhang Yuniang also kept persuading her. Children's willpower is already weak when it comes to delicious food. When Niu recalled the wonderful taste of braised food made with her own secret recipe, she couldn't help but salivate. Her chopsticks moved uncontrollably towards the first piece of meat, taking a bite of the meat and a bite of rice. Niu has been raised by the Gu family for several months, and she is no longer as thin as before. Now the little girl is as delicate and cute as a snowball. If she were dressed in exquisite clothes, some people would believe her if they said she was a young lady from Beijing. At this time, Niu's cheeks were slightly raised, and her whole body was exuding the light of being wrapped in happiness. The little girl had no idea how powerful the appeal of the way she was eating was. When others just took a look at it, they couldn't help but think, being treated like this by Niu, what kind of delicacies is the food that we take seriously? A middle-aged man was passing by outside the shop. He was passing by in a hurry, but he took a surprised look and happened to see Niu closing her eyes with satisfaction after taking a bite of her meal. As if out of control, Cheng He walked into the shop. Lu Xiru finally woke up from the strange atmosphere infected by Niu's meal when she heard the footsteps of someone coming in, and hurriedly greeted the guests. But this customer didn't seem to need her to recruit her at all, and asked directly, "What is this little girl eating? Give me some." Lu Xiru was about to say that she had made it up by force, but before she spoke, she felt happy and said with a smile, "Guest, this is the signature of our store, called 5 Blessings. The portion this child ate is small. Do you want a larger portion or the same one?" Chen He's family was well off and he didn't care much about money. When he heard this, he said directly, "Get a big one." The 5 kinds of braised food were mixed together, both meat and vegetable. It was not easy to price. Lu Xiru was not a profiteer, so she honestly weighed each portion individually and calculated the price. Chen He's family has been in business for generations, and he has been calculating abacus since he was 1 year old. Seeing what Lu Xiru did, he nodded secretly, thinking that he was also an honest person. After Chen He, many passing customers were attracted by Niu Niu's eating style. Before Niu Niu finished eating, all the remaining braised food was sold. On the first day of doing business, she had a good start. Lu Xiru was so excited that she rushed to Niu Niu and hugged the little girl. "Niu Niu is so amazing. I like Niu Niu the most." When Niu Niu heard this, she looked at Lu Xiru with bright eyes. Although the little girl didn't know what kind of help she had done, she became happy when she saw Aunt Lu so happy. Lu Xiru pressed her face against Niu Niu's tender face, as if she could draw infinite power from this, and kept saying words such as "good baby is so soft" and "good baby smells so good." She looks like a weird aunt, the kind who can scare away children. But Niu Niu was not afraid at all. Perhaps because she knew that Lu Xiru really loved her, Niu Niu responded from time to time, which made Lu Xiru even more happy. "Sister, are you really going back to Qingshui village tomorrow? Can't you stay a few more days? Please stay with me more. I'm so scared to do business alone," Lu Xiru said pitifully, grabbing Zhang Yuniang's sleeve. Zhang Yuniang exposed her on the spot. "You are not reluctant to leave me, but you are obviously reluctant to leave Niu Niu." Lu Xiru smiled and said, "I can't bear to leave my sister either. It would be best if my sister and Niu Niu stayed with me." Zhang Yuniang shook her head and said, "We have been away from Qingshui village for a long time. If we don't go back, our parents will be worried. There are many things waiting for us to go back and deal with there." Lu Xiru was disappointed, but she still cheered up and asked, "Sister, when will you come back after you go back this time?" Zhang Yuniang said, "I am afraid that your brother-in-law will come to the county often in the future. I am also worried about you. I will definitely come here before the new year." Lu Xiru almost thought, "Then you must bring Niu Niu here. Don't forget it." First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 72. Zhang Yuniang showed a look of as expected when she heard this. She reached out and gently poked Niu Niu's smooth forehead, and said to her daughter, "Look, your Aunt Lu has only known you for a short time, but she is already thinking about you in everything. When you grow up, remember to be filial to Aunt Lu, do you know?" Niu Niu smiled and nodded, and then leaned her head softly on Lu Xiru's neck, and said in a baby voice, "Mom, I will be filial to Aunt Lu and you. In the future, I will make a lot of money and buy you a big house to live in and buy countless gold jewelry to wear. Mom and Aunt Lu don't have to do anything, just enjoy every day." Zhang Yuniang's heart softened when she heard this, and she said angrily, "I don't know who learned it from, so sweet." Lu Xiru laughed and laughed at the side, and couldn't help sighing, saying, "If I were a man, I would marry my sister and be Niu Niu's father, then I would definitely be the happiest man in the world." Before Zhang Yuniang had time to speak, a familiar man's voice came from outside the shop. "You are not so lucky. I am the luckiest man in the world." Gu Mingda walked in with a lot of bags and a smile. Niu Niu hadn't seen Gu Mingda for a whole day, and she immediately cheered. Her little body was about to throw itself on Gu Mingda, and Lu Xiru almost didn't hold her. Na Yunio said she liked me and was filial to me, but once she saw your father, she threw me out of her mind. Lu Xiru pretended to be jealous. Na Yunio immediately turned around and shrank back to Lu Xiru, stretched out her little hand and gently patted the top of Lu Xiru's head, imitating the way Zhang Yuniang usually coaxed the child, looking at her seriously, and said, Na Yunio really likes Aunt Lu very much. Na Yunio didn't lie, but Na Yunio likes several people. In addition to Aunt Lu, there are also parents, grandparents, and the eldest, second, and third brothers. Lu Xiru was stared at intently by the child's eyes, and she couldn't help but believe everything the child said, and believed that she was also a very important existence to Na Yuniu. The jealousy in Lu Xiru's heart suddenly disappeared. Zhang Yuniang and Gu Mingde, who were standing by, also felt bitter at this time. They thought that although Na Yuniu was young, she was like a mirror in her heart and knew who was the real one. The next morning, when the stewed food was cooked, there were 3 or 4 people waiting outside the door. I don't know how your stewed food is made. People want to eat it again after eating it. Before I tasted it, my husband had been tossing and turning in bed all night, thinking about it. I finally ate it yesterday. My husband still wants to eat it. The children at home also love it. They urged me to come before dawn, fearing that others would grab it all, the woman said with a smile. She was the first customer yesterday, and the first one to come today. Lu Xiru felt that nothing was happier than seeing repeat customers. Although she was very confident in her own stewed food, the affirmation from customers made it easier for her to be confident in this business. I want dried tofu and a roast chicken. The woman had already spent a lot of money to buy so many things at once, but when she saw the fragrant quail eggs, she couldn't help but be moved. I don't know if your quail eggs are delicious, the woman whispered. Lu Xiru weighed the dried tofu and roast chicken she wanted, calculated the money, and scooped 2 quail eggs in. The woman was unhappy when she saw this move. She thought she was forced to buy and was about to say that she hadn't decided whether to buy or not. Lu Xiru smiled and said, a good start, I'll treat you to these quail eggs, no money. The woman immediately smiled. The customer waiting behind her saw this and immediately brightened up and said, I also want to know if the quail eggs are delicious. Lu Xiru naturally knew that she had met someone who was looking for a bargain. Recalling the amount of money the woman had just bought, she said confidently, customer, if you spend more than 5 cents, you will get 2 quail eggs. The customer didn't want to buy so many, but seeing that there was a bargain to be made, she gritted her teeth and bought a lot. The customers who came to wait early in the morning were willing to spend money to eat braised food that was much more expensive than ordinary ingredients, which proved that they were not short of money. The 2 customers behind also bought a lot of quail eggs to take advantage of the bargain. Lu Xiru thought that the business would be much worse without Na Yuniu's live performance, but she didn't expect that more than half of yesterday's customers would become repeat customers today. Although the location is remote, relying on these repeat customers, more than half of the sales were sold in the morning. Towards noon, another big customer came. As soon as Chen He entered the door, he said, how much braised food do you have left? I'll buy it all. Lu Xiru remembered this person and bought a lot yesterday. Are you sure you want all of it? Lu Xiru asked in disbelief. After all, there were so many braised food left, and the total amount was almost 10 taels of silver. Chen He nodded vigorously. He was amazed by the food he brought back yesterday after just tasting it. His grandfather was almost 70 years old, and he almost fought with his father on the spot for a bite of food. Chen He came to Yuanbao Street to collect debts yesterday. He didn't expect that he would encounter such a big surprise just by going out casually. After the initial excitement, Lu Xiru was not very willing to sell it, and said, customer, no matter how good the braised food is, it can't be eaten as a meal. Chen He hurriedly said, my surname is Chen, Chen above and He below, you can just call me by my name. Others introduced themselves, and Lu Xiaoru could only respond politely. But she still insisted on her idea. Boss Chen, I can't sell you all the remaining braised food. First, there are too many, and it will be a waste if you can't finish it. Second, it's not even halfway through the day. If other customers come in the afternoon and can't buy my braised food, they will be sad. Chen He was very rich and said, Boss Lu, money is not a problem. As long as it can be guaranteed to be as delicious as yesterday, I can increase the price by 10%. As for the waste, you don't have to worry about it. I run a restaurant. I buy so many braised food to attract business for my restaurant. When Lu Xiaoru heard this, she realized that this was a big business. But she continued to shake her head and said, now there are so many braised food left, I can sell you half at most. Lu Xiaoru did this not out of consideration for the long-term business. But she remembered the woman who came to buy braised food early in the morning for 2 consecutive days. She remembered the happiness and satisfaction of getting delicious food on her face when she mentioned her own braised food. Chen He didn't know what Lu Xiaoru was thinking, but he looked at her with a higher opinion. In the short term, it is indeed time-saving and labor-saving to pack and sell all the braised food at once, but in the long term, it is not a good thing. The braised food in this shop is really good. As long as there are enough people selling it, there will be a constant stream of repeat customers, and there will never be a lack of business. Chen He didn't expect that Lu Xiaoru looked ordinary, but she was unmoved by the huge temptation. She was quite good. He wanted to persuade her again, but Lu Xiaoru was very determined. Chen He had no choice but to buy the remaining half of the braised food reluctantly. Now that the business has just started, Lu Xiaoru cooks a pot every day in the big iron pot in the backyard kitchen, and tries to sell it all on the same day, not leaving it overnight. Boss Lu, forget about today. Tomorrow you can cook a big pot of braised food for me, and I can pay you a deposit in advance. Chen He was afraid that Lu Xiaoru would be unhappy, so he changed his words just after saying this, I can pay all the money, as long as you can give me a pot of braised food. You name a price, and I will give you the money now. Lu Xiaoru looked embarrassed and said, there is only one big pot in the backyard. Even if I want to agree, there is nothing I can do. Chen He said without thinking, how big is the pot? I will buy it for you. Do you need to build a stove? I will find someone to build one for you today. Second update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 73. The road back to the county seat is still long. Gu Mingda rented a carriage from the county horse and carriage company. Because it was a chartered carriage, it could be sent directly to Qingshui village without passing through the county. Due to the remote location of Qingshui village, carriages rarely come. As soon as they entered the village, the children at the entrance of the village started to scream when they saw the carriage. Gu Mingda opened the car curtain and accurately saw the Gu family's dolls among the children. In such trivial matters, Gu Mingda was also happy to be a respectable elder and shouted to the children in the third room of the first house. The carriage stopped, and Gu Yun, Gu Jin, Da Ya and Xiao Ya climbed up with excitement on their faces. I'm riding a carriage. It's much more stable than an ox cart. Gu Jin sat in the carriage and shouted excitedly to his friends below. Gu Mingda took out the snacks he had prepared a long time ago and gave a pack to each child in the family. When it was given to Xiao, she stuffed it all into her mouth and devoured it as soon as she got it. This action made Niu Niu stunned for a moment, and she said, little sister, if you eat so much in one breath, you will easily choke. Choking is very uncomfortable. As soon as she finished speaking, Xiao suddenly began to roll her eyes, obviously eating too much in one go and choking her neck. Zhang Yuniang hurriedly handed over the water bag and felt relieved after watching Xiao drink the water and swallow the food. You kid, why are you in such a hurry to eat? Take your time, it's all yours, and no one is trying to steal it from you. After Zhang Yuniang finished speaking, she patted Xiao's back to calm her down. After a long time, Xiao whispered, if I don't eat quickly, it won't be my turn to eat when I get back. Zhang Yuniang thought of Xiao's mother, Lu Ernie, who was not good at speaking ill of her sister-in-law, so she could only remain silent. But Na Yuniu took the initiative and said, then you can keep it here with me and I will keep it for you. I promise not to eat it secretly. The child's words were innocent, and only another child believed her. Gu Xiao asked happily, really? Are you really willing to help me keep it? Na Yuniu nodded vigorously. Other children on the side also came over and said, I can also keep it for you. Leave all the delicious food to me in the future. It should be a very touching scene, but Gu Xiao looked at several of them with a defensive expression. I don't want you to keep it. It's useless if I leave it to you. I can only trust Na Yuniu and Brother Yan, Gu Xiao said. Gu Dia immediately became unhappy and asked, forget it, if you can't trust my brother, why can't you even trust me? We are the best friends. Gu Xiao said directly, the chestnuts I picked up last time. Gu Dia shut up immediately. Gu Xiao took Niu Niu's hand, turned to Gu Dia and said proudly, if you steal the chestnuts I asked you to keep, it will be best for me to never be with you again. It will be best for me to be with Na Yuniu in the future, because she the most well-behaved, she will make a sand table for me and share delicious food with me. Gu Mingda glanced at Niu Niu in surprise. He had been out of school for 2 or 3 months in a hurry to take the exam. Children are very forgetful. He thought Xiao and the others would simply forget about Niu Niu, a sister who had just come to the house not long ago. But I didn't expect that people would remember it clearly and even stage a fight over it. When Gu Dia heard what her cousin said, she took Niu Niu's other hand and said, Niu Niu is not the best with you, Niu Niu is the best with me. You are not my favorite sister anymore, Niu Niu is the best. Yes. The little girl's feelings come quickly and her temper is quick. Even though it's a trivial matter, it gets bigger and bigger. It's best to follow me. No, she likes me the most. The two of them each held Niu Niu's hand and almost started fighting. Zhang Yuniang saw that Niu Niu's little face was red from being pulled, and she quickly stopped her two nieces, who were neither serious nor serious. Okay, I like it. You are all Niu Niu's favorite sister. In front of the elders, Da Ya and Xiao Ya finally stopped arguing. Gu Xiao was still unwilling to give in, so she leaned into Niu Niu's ear and whispered, Niu Niu, you have to be my first priority. Seeing this action, Gu Dia immediately asked, what are you whispering? Gu Xiao didn't answer, but made a face at her. Seeing the situation, Gu Dia was so anxious that she was about to jump up again. Zhang Yuniang quickly grabbed the person and said, we're almost home, we're almost home. Old Gu's house was not far from the entrance of the village, and the carriage was parked outside the yard. Mrs. Gu was still wondering where the carriage came from, but Gu Yun, a half-year-old boy, jumped out of the carriage and said with a smile, Mistress, the second uncle is back. He bought a lot of things. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Gu immediately laughed so hard that she couldn't even see her eyes, and said, oh, my second son has become successful and came back in a carriage. Gu's third daughter-in-law, Lu Ernie, looked at the carriage that was rarely seen in the countryside, and said sourly, second brother is now a scholar. He is different from us mud-legged people. He doesn't know how to put on such a big pomp. How much money will be spent on my parents in the future? Gu Mingda brought a carriage back this time not to show off, but simply because he didn't want the children to be too tired. Hearing his sister-in-law's sinister words, before he could speak, Mrs. Gu had already spat, you still have the nerve to say these things. No one can be more filial to us than you and the third child. Gu Mingda was shocked when he saw his mother's eyes spitting fire when she disagreed. In the past, he only knew that my mother didn't like his sister-in-law, but he had never seen her hate her so much before. Now she is gnashing her teeth and ready to rush forward and take a bite at any time. It's like there is a deep hatred. When Lu Ernie heard this, she also looked guilty, and she found an excuse to hide in the house. Mrs. Gu stood there for a long time, and then she forced a smile again. She looked at the second family and said, 10 days ago, the government sent someone back to report that you got the first place in the college entrance examination. I knew you were coming back. I clean your room every day. You must be tired after sitting in the carriage for so long. Take a rest quickly. Okay, I will listen to you, Gu Mingda said with a smile. He jumped off the carriage first, turned around and helped Zhang Yuniang out of the carriage. Several young boys didn't need help, they jumped off directly, and helped the second couple to carry the big and small bags into the house. Zhang Yuniang turned around and took Na Yuniu down from the carriage. As soon as she landed, the little girl threw herself on Mrs. Gu like a young swallow. Grandma, Na Yuniu missed you so much outside, Na Yuniu said loudly. Na Yuniu really missed Grandma Gu. Every time she saw how Mrs. Jian doted on the adopted grandson, she couldn't help but think of Grandma Gu, who loved her just as much. Grandma Gu smiled sincerely, stretched out her old hands and repeatedly stroked Na Yuniu's little face, calling her my sweetheart. The two of them stayed together for a long time. Grandma Gu looked around like a thief to make sure no one saw her. Then she secretly took out a red wild fruit the size of a baby's fist and stuffed it into Na Yuniu's hand, urging her, hurry up and keep it. Grandma will only give it to you. Don't let others see it. First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 74. The moment a child feels special is probably when he gets extra favor from his elders. Na Yuniu once felt a little guilty because of her grandmother's behavior. It was like she had it but her brothers and sisters didn't. Isn't this unfair? But Mrs. Gu gave her a very powerful explanation: Grandma's things can be given to anyone she likes. Is there anything fair or unfair about it? Of course, even though Mrs. Gu said this, she still knew how to hide her partiality. The partiality was only in such insignificant matters, but she still treated the children equally in major matters. Na Yuniu pulled her grandma to the backyard and said, I miss Grandpa too. Mrs. Gu immediately said, your grandpa is not at home. The old man went out to find food for the chickens. Niu Niu was a little disappointed when she heard this, but she quickly cheered up and asked, have you not come back for so long? Have the chicks grown up? Mrs. Gu immediately became energetic and said, your chickens are growing really well, dear, Grandma will take you to see them now. This group of chickens was raised by the sick chickens that Father Gu asked someone to beg for when Niu Niu first came to this house. According to common sense, none of them should be able to grow up, but now every one of them is very energetic. It's impossible to tell that they were once sickly chickens. Xiahua, do you still remember me? I'm Niu Niu, Niu Niu said to one of the hens with bright fur. The hen Xiahua really seemed to understand. She turned around and said cluck to Niu Niu, then sat down. When she got up again, there was a freshly baked egg on the ground. Mrs. Gu immediately said excitedly, it's cold in winter, and chickens don't like to lay eggs anymore. They will lay eggs as soon as you come back. It really likes you. Niu Niu was so happy that her face turned red when she heard this. Sister-in-law Gu, Chen Chunyua, carried a basin of pig food and poured it directly into the trough of the pig pen next to the chicken coop. She said with a smile, Mom, our father is still good at raising chickens. Many families in the village follow our example of raising sick and weak chickens, and they don't even survive. Mrs. Gu glanced at her sideways and said, you still have the nerve to laugh at others, but you yourself did such a stupid thing. Chen Chunyua smiled flatteringly at Mrsku, and then said, Mom, my second brother has passed the scholar examination. Our family's status is now different from before. We need to be rich during the new year, and we have to show off when visiting relatives and friends, otherwise outsiders will laugh. Mrsku and Chen Chunyua have been mother-in-law and daughter-in-law for more than 10 years. As soon as the eldest daughter-in-law sticks her butt out, she knows what she is going to do. She talks about showing off, but in fact her eyes are fixed on these chickens. Mrsku immediately lost her temper and said, don't think too much about these chickens. They were raised by the old man for Niu Niu. They didn't use a grain of corn or a vegetable leaf. From beginning to end, they have nothing to do with you. What Chen Chunyua saw was not lively chickens, but pieces of fragrant chicken. She watched helplessly as Father Gu raised a group of sickly chickens into what they are now. How could she be willing to give up such a huge profit? As soon as it reaches your mouth, it slips away. Mom, you are too partial to the second brother-in-law. The second brother gave away the wild boar that was brought back from the mountains indiscriminately just to save face. It's a shame that our first brother-in-law couldn't bear it. Now why are these chickens raised by father? The eldest and second child of our family is your own granddaughter. How much closer is she to this loser? Listening to what Chen Chunyua said, Mrsku felt that all the blood in her body was rushing to her head. Her lips were trembling with anger, and her old body couldn't help but begin to sway. Niu Niu was the first to notice the same thing about Mrsku, and she burst into tears with a cry, Grandma! Grandma, what's wrong with you? Don't scare Niu Niu. Niu Niu doesn't want these chickens anymore, Niu Niu only wants Grandma to be well. Children crying loudly are always particularly sensitive to parents. The moment Gu Mingda and Zhang Yuniang heard the sound, they rushed directly to the backyard and hurriedly supported the shaky old lady Gu. Gu Mingda has always been gentle, but now seeing Mrsku become like this, he couldn't hold it back and asked Chen Chunyua, sister-in-law, what on earth did you say to make me so angry? Chen Chunyua huddled aside, with a guilty look on her face, and she was still denying, I didn't say anything, I don't know why my mother suddenly felt uncomfortable. Seeing that she didn't answer the question, Gu Mingda could only stamp his feet, looked at Zhang Yuniang, and asked, quickly stop the driver, and send my mother to the town to see the doctor first. After they got off the carriage, they did not immediately let the driver return. Instead, following the custom of rural hospitality, they left the driver to drink tea at home. The coachman stayed for a while to be polite and then drove away just now. Zhang Yuniang always thought about her mother-in-law's good deeds, so after hearing this, she quickly chased after her. Fortunately, the coachman was stopped at the entrance of the village to ask questions. When the other party learned that the Gu family was shocked, he turned the carriage back without saying a word. It was almost dusk when Mrsku was sent to the town. The same old doctor from last time was still in the town. He still remembered Zhang Yuniang. After feeling Mrsku's pulse, he injected a few needles on the spot and deliberated for a long time before writing out a prescription. Seeing the serious look on the old doctor's face, Gu Mingda's heart felt as if it had been fried in a pan, and he asked, Doctor, how is my mother? The old doctor sighed and said, Fortunately, you delivered it in time. If it had been a little later, the old lady would probably have had a stroke. When Gu Mingda heard this, he was still filled with disbelief. He remembered that my mother's body had always been strong. She was fine before he left home to take the exam. How could she suddenly reach this point? Zhang Yuniang gently held Gu Mingda's hand. In the past, her husband always cared for and supported her. She rarely saw her husband be so vulnerable. Doctor, please prescribe the best medicine for my mother-in-law. We will find ways to pay for it. Please cure my mother-in-law, Zhang Yuniang repeatedly requested the old doctor. Gu Mingda also kept nodding at the side, his eyes pleading. The old doctor confirmed that the couple was sincere and said a few more words. Your mother doesn't use any particularly expensive medicinal materials. She is old and cannot bear to be angry. She has been sulking a lot during this time. We should encourage her to relax and don't let her body get in trouble even if something doesn't work out for her. When Gu Mingda heard these words, today was not the first time that Mrsgu was angry recently. He immediately turned to look at the pale Mrsgu and asked, Mom, what happened while I was not at home? Who is it that makes you angry? When Mrsgu heard this, a touch of bitterness overflowed from the corner of her mouth. Gu Mingda looked at Niuniu, whose eyes were red and swollen from crying, but still pressed against Mrsgu with a worried look on her face, and asked, Niuniu, you are a good child, tell Dad what your aunt did in the backyard earlier. What? Second update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 75. Mrsgu seemed to realize something, stretched out her hand to pull Niuniu, and shook her head at the child. Gu Mingda looked at her very disapprovingly and said, Mom, if you have anything to say clearly to me in person, if you insist on hiding it, then I will just think that my sister-in-law is deliberately angry with you and disobeys you. I will go to the yamen to sue her now. Gu Mingda deliberately made the matter serious. He didn't just say it and let it go. He got up on the spot and asked the coachman who was still waiting outside the door to drive to the county. Mrsgu was anxious and said quickly, Second brother. Second child. Don't leave. I said. Gu Mingda stopped when he heard this and turned to look at Mrsgu. Mrsgu finally said it, but she still couldn't help complaining, my son doesn't look like a son, but he is like a living father. Gu Mingda's face fell. Mrsgu immediately smiled and said, let me put it bluntly, your sister-in-law is worried about her boss's marriage. She is afraid that the family will not have enough money to spend. I am also worried, and I fainted all of a sudden. Gu Mingda lowered his face and said, you can't even deceive a 3-year-old child with your words. He understands better than anyone else what I am thinking, and he also knows why I have to deliberately hide it from my sister-in-law even when I am getting to this point. The old lady's heart is about brotherly harmony and family reunion. If anything happens, the old lady would rather be wrong than make trouble. Now that Gu Mingda is about to take the exam and her family has changed, she is even less willing to separate the family. Gu Mingda looked at the other party at the scene. Niuniu, tell me. Niuniu was caught between her father and her grandmother. She was very afraid that her words would cause conflicts between her father and her grandmother. The little girl had never experienced such things and looked at her grandmother hesitantly. Mrsgu winked at the child crazily. Gu Mingda directly led Niuniu to his side, stretched out his 2 hands to support the sides of the little girl's head, so that the child could only look at him, and said, tell the truth to Dad, what happened? Niuniu wanted to turn her face to look at Mrsgu, but Gu Mingda held her face down and could not move. You can't see your grandma now, so you can only tell the truth to your father, Gu Mingda said. Niuniu sighed like an adult, she seemed to have no choice. After hearing what happened next to the chicken coop, Gu Mingda frowned, wishing he could kill the fly. Mom, my sister-in-law said such stupid things, and you still have to hide it for her. Gu Mingda was very dissatisfied. Mrsgu shrank her neck and said, your sister-in-law is a talkative person. She just has a short-sighted vision and cannot see the long term. In her heart, she treats Niuniu and Xiao the same. There is no difference. Mrsgu's words are actually not adulterated. After all, in the eyes of Mrsgu, except for Gu Dia, the other girls in the family are really no different. Gu Mingda could neither accept that his mother, who had worked hard all her life, was bullied by her sister-in-law, nor could he bear that his precious daughter was scolded like this, so he had already made a decision in his heart. Mrsku was not feeling well, so she still took a carriage on her way back. In the carriage, Mrsku's kind words came out as if they were for free. Second brother, don't say anything. This carriage ride is much smoother than an ox cart. My second brother is promising enough to allow my mother to enjoy this blessing. The happiest thing in my life is to have a good son like you. Gu Mingda was not fooled, but asked, Mom, according to the doctor, you have been sulking at home for the past 2 months. Besides my sister-in-law, who else can make you feel angry? Mrsku started pretending to be stupid again. No, no one can offend me. I am the daughter of a scholar, no one dares to offend me. Gu Mingda also knew how to deal with my mother. In order not to fall for her flattery, he said very simply, Mom, what's the matter with you now? Why are you talking so weirdly? Mrsku was heartbroken when she heard this, knowing that she couldn't be fooled. She finally became honest and her expression became serious, and said, when a large family lives together, it is inevitable that they will stumble. Brother, you don't have to be too strict. Go online, Mom and your dad are the heads of the family, even if we are angry, it's because we can't think about it ourselves. Gu Mingda took over the conversation, Mom, the tree has big branches. Since they are crowded together, it is better to separate, so as not to make each other unhappy. When Mrsku heard the 2 words she was most afraid of, her expression turned ugly and she said, you have just been admitted as a scholar and you are about to separate your family. If outsiders find out, they will think that you have become rich and they can't wait. If you want to kick your brother away, it won't do you any good. Gu Mingda had obviously thought about it clearly and looked directly at Mrsku with sincere eyes. Mom, I'm not afraid of these bad reputations. I can ignore these gossips. I just hope that you can live a comfortable life. As long as you can avoid these idle thoughts, right? It's more important to me than anything else. When Mrsku heard what her son said, she felt so soft-hearted, but Gu Mingda was her son, and the other 2 were also her biological children. She doesn't do that kind of thing where one son's money is used to subsidize the other 2 sons. The reason why she suppresses Gu Mingda and doesn't want to separate the family is because she hopes that when the other 2 sons become confused, Gu Mingda is the only smart one in the family. A person can pull it. Because her requirements were low, Gu Mingda laughed it off countless times in the past when the third and third bedrooms made mistakes. You are all my children. I don't want to see you split up and fight for that little bit of property. From now on, I will listen to you in all matters of the family. I will listen to you too. Second son, let's not split up, okay, said Mrsku softly. The old lady secretly hoped that her second son would take over and be the helmsman of the family, but her idea was doomed to fail. Mother, not to mention that the eldest brother is the eldest son, what would he think if he knew about this? Even the third son would probably not be happy. They would only think that you are partial and have given our second house some great benefits in private, said Gu Mingda. The old lady looked depressed when she heard this. She sighed in the carriage and looked like she had been defeated. Niu Niu didn't quite understand the conversation between her grandmother and her father, nor did she understand why this matter made her grandmother so uncomfortable. She could only lean on the old lady gently, dig into her little purse, and take out a piece of candy. Grandma, eat candy. Mother said that eating sweet things will make you happy, Niu Niu said softly. Faced with the comfort of her most beloved granddaughter, Grandma Gu forced herself to cheer up, stretched out her hand and placed it on Niu Niu's shoulder, hugging the child. Niu Niu, your father insisted on dividing the family, and Grandma doesn't want to divide the family, Grandma Gu said very aggrievedly. Niu Niu heard this and tilted her head and said, Grandma thinks Dad did something wrong. Grandma Gu was speechless. First update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 76. Seeing that Mrsku didn't speak, Niu asked timidly, "Grandma, did Niu say something wrong and make you unhappy?" Seeing the child's uneasy look, Mrsku felt a little guilty and said, "Niu is right." Niu asked again, "Then since Grandma also thinks Dad is right, why is she still unhappy?" Mrsku was startled when she heard this. Being stared at by her precious granddaughter's clear eyes, Mrsku rarely began to reflect on herself. She also knew that it was purely wishful thinking that she was bringing a large family together now. She wanted Gu Mingda to help her brother. To a certain extent, this was not partiality. Just because the second child was smart and capable of taking on tasks, he wanted to put the two idiots, the eldest and the third, into his charge. This seemed unfair to Gu Mingda. After thinking about it clearly, Mrsku seemed to be wrapped in guilt for a moment. She looked up at her second son apologetically and said softly, "Second son, it's my mother who is greedy." Naturally, Gu Mingda would not hold grudges against his mother. Looking at his mother's old face, he thought that she had been like an old scalper over the years, trying her best to take care of the whole family. "Mom, you and Dad have worked hard all your life. I don't want you to worry about these things anymore. Just wait and enjoy yourself. This time we separate, you can live with me from now on, okay?" Gu Mingda said softly. When Mrsku heard this, she couldn't help but look at Zhang Yuniang. The old lady has been in charge of the family her whole life. If she continues to take charge of the family and is the backbone of the family, she will naturally remain true to her word. But if it is determined that he will live with a certain son in the future, then the future will depend on the face of the daughter-in-law. Zhang Yuniang held her mother-in-law's old hand and said softly, "Mom, I have experienced little and don't understand many things. I will still be waiting for you to help me make decisions in the future." When Mrsku heard this, she thought about it. Compared with the two daughters-in-law, Chen Chunyue and Lu Erni, Zhang Yuniang, the second daughter-in-law, had indeed never had any conflicts with her in the past. After the comparison, she could not calm down. After all, the other two sons were too unreliable. She was always afraid that they would not be able to survive without her keeping an eye on them. Gu Mingda said, "I know you are always worried about your eldest brother and third brother. When we separate, I can ask for nothing but you and Dad. Even if Gu Mingda fails to pass the imperial examination in the future, he does not plan to stay in Qingshui village for a long time, and he will not come back to farm after taking the land from the village. Moreover, he has many ways to make money, and he does not lack these 3 melons and 2 dates. The most important thing is that he separated the family just after he was admitted as a scholar. If he still takes advantage of the family, outsiders will definitely gossip. He simply suffered a little loss and gained a reputation for being generous." At this time, Mrsku was shocked by her second son's generosity. "You don't want the land or the house? Brother, do you know what you are talking about? What do you think, Yun Niang? Are you planning to ask for nothing? You have 4 children. 3 of your sons are going to get wives. Niunia will she also needs to give her a decent dowry when she gets married, how can she not ask for anything?" Mrsku asked eagerly. Zhang Yuniang chuckled softly and said to her mother-in-law, "Mom, my husband and I think the same. Farms and houses are personal possessions. As long as you and Dad can feel at ease, that is more important than anything else." Tears suddenly fell from Mrsku's eyes. Her daughter-in-law could think this way, and she felt more and more that she didn't need to worry about her future life. With such a character, she didn't worry at all that her daughter-in-law would be mean to her in the future. "You are all good. If Chen Chunyue and Lu Erni could be like you, I wouldn't have to worry like this." Mrsku grabbed Zhang Yuniang's hand and praised. Only then did Gu Mingda repeat the previous question, Mom, can you tell me now, who has I been angry with at home these past 2 months as I rushed to take the exam? Is it the third younger brother or sister? Mrs. Gu didn't want to say anything yet. Gu Mingda said, I can ask others without telling you. If others add insult to injury, I will believe it. Mrs. Gu had no choice but to speak reluctantly. Lu Ernie, a fool, secretly learned our family's tofu recipe and taught it to her younger brothers. The Lu family can sell a piece of tofu cheaper than our family. It caused our tofu workshop to collapse. Gu Mingda was stunned when he heard this, and asked, our tofu can't be sold in Qingshui village, what about Qingjia village? It's my sister-in-law's natal family, is there no one to buy it? When Mrs. Gu heard this, she got angry and said, those bastards from the Lu family are very fast. When people in Qingjia village see cheap tofu to buy, they don't care whether they are relatives or not. They don't even think about it. Although Liu's tofu is cheaper, the cuts are smaller than ours, and the materials used are not as strong as ours. They are all short-sighted people who are greedy for petty gains. Gu Mingda sighed and said, I originally thought that with the addition of a tofu-making business in the family, the life of the eldest brother and the third brother would be easier. What did the third brother and sister think? What did the third brother say? Old Mrs. Gu also hated it. Although the tofu workshop was just a small business, it could not keep up with the steady flow of money. It could make money every day. At this time of year, there were more people buying tofu and more money was made. Your third brother, that good-for-nothing, was obsessed with his wife. He was angry for a few days and ignored such a big thing. He deserves to be a bastard for the rest of his life. As a mother, Mrs. Gu can scold her son as she pleases, but Gu Mingda cannot speak ill of his brother. Besides, the old lady is not in good health and cannot accept anger. Everything is going well with the family. Third brother has no other choice now. He can't live his life in vain. Gu Mingda comforted him. Old lady Gu was still unhappy and said, if it weren't for the two children, I would have asked the third son to divorce her. The carriage stopped outside the old Gu family. The eldest and third sons of the Gu family obviously knew what had happened before. When they saw Gu Mingda getting off the carriage, they asked anxiously, second brother, is mother okay? Old lady Gu opened the carriage curtain and was helped off the carriage with a gloomy face. Although Gu Mingda didn't gossip about his brothers, he thought of the anger that his mother had suffered during this period and saw that the two brothers didn't look happy, so he simply didn't answer. Mrs. Gu suddenly asked the driver loudly, because of my illness, will my second son have to pay you a lot more money? The driver didn't understand, but still answered honestly, old lady, don't worry, our carriage and horse company is not the kind of black-hearted people. We will never ask for a lot for this extra trip. We only charged him 5 cents of silver. When Mrs. Gu heard this amount, she couldn't help but feel heartbroken, and asked again, do you remember how much money you spent on my treatment in the clinic before? The driver still didn't know what the old lady was going to do, but still answered, I saw it clearly from the side. The pulse diagnosis and medicine cost 2 taels of silver in total. Old lady, you are blessed, your second son is very generous. The eldest and third sons of the Gu family were afraid that the money would be shared by their two families, so they hurriedly said, yes, yes, our second brother is the most promising person in the family. He is not only rich, but also a scholar now. In the future, our parents are counting on him. When Mrs. Gu saw them like this, she couldn't help but frown. She had long known that these two sons were not as filial as Gu Mingda, but she still couldn't help but feel upset. She raised her voice and said, he is not my only son. The money must be shared equally by the three of you. The second update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 77. When Gu Laosan and Gu Laosan heard this, they were both stunned. They couldn't understand why my mother was not happy after the second son had paid. No one was willing to contribute their personal money. Gu Lao-san, who had little money, was the first to jump out and said, "Mom, the second brother can raise enough money to take the exam without relying on the family. He is still a scholar. It doesn't matter if he pays you some medical money. The second brother doesn't think it's anything, so why do you have to be this evil person?" When Mrsku heard this, she immediately became unhappy and said, "The second brother is capable, so he deserves to pay for it all by himself. Are you uncomfortable if he is admitted to the scholar examination? Why didn't you study when he was admitted? According to you, you deserve it. Your brothers-in-law stole our formula. Who made his family poorer than ours, right?" When mentioning the Lu family's brothers-in-law, Gu Lao-san fell silent instantly. Lu Ernie, who was originally planning to help her husband, now looked like she did not dare to continue talking. Chen Chunyua, the eldest daughter-in-law, does not dare to come forward because her mother-in-law is angry. Instead, she hides in the house, lying on the window and constantly looking out. Compared to the three-bedroom couple who were there was only Mr. Gu in the big room in the courtyard at this time, so it seemed a little thin. As the eldest son, Gu Boss should have been the backbone of the family, but Gu Mingda has always been too outstanding. Gu Mingda is more like the actual eldest son of the family than his eldest brother. At this time, he said angrily, "Mom, our big house doesn't have much private money, and I still have 3 children." Although Mrsku had known that this would be the result, she had to say that she was still a little disappointed at this time. She pointed at her 2 sons and asked, "I am so deceived by lard, how could I raise you 2 unfilial things? If I had known, I would have drowned you in a bucket of urine when I hit you." The mother's natural suppression of her sons caused the 2 sons to lower their heads at this time and did not dare to raise their heads for a long time. Lu Ernie, on the other hand, after making the big mistake of stealing the formula, she always felt that the matter would be over after a few scoldings from her family, so she whispered to Gu Lao-san, "Who usually goes to town by carriage? Not even to the hospital. Dare you prescribe such expensive medicine?" Although Mrsku is not young, her ears are still very sharp. After hearing this, she immediately pointed at Mr. Gu's nose and scolded, "Listen to what your wife said. It's because I enjoy it too much. I don't even want to pay for any medicine." She is very generous to her mother-in-law. Gu Lao-san quickly pulled Lu Ernie and signaled her to stop talking. Mrsku scolded her for a long time, and the 2 sons listened obediently to her scolding. However, the money was in a state where they could not survive, so they just thought that the matter would be over when the old lady had finished venting her anger. Countless times in the past, they had resolved conflicts with their parents this way. But what they don't know is that people's disappointment does not burst out all at once, but accumulates bit by bit. The harder Mrsku scolds, the colder her heart becomes. She didn't think about asking her 2 sons to pay at first. Even Gu Mingda didn't care about medical expenses or transportation expenses, but the 2 sons made up their minds to spend nothing. Older people have 2 things on their minds: the future of their children and grandchildren and their own retirement. Looking at her now, Mrsku feels more and more that she and her father Gu can't count on them for their retirement. After scolding too much, Mrsku became bored, her voice became lower and lower, and she spoke less and less. The 2 sons thought that this dispute was about to be resolved. Bosku helped Mrsku go into the house and said, "Mom, you are not feeling well now. You need to rest more." Mrsku did not change her mind because of these soft words. She originally wanted to wait until the new year before separating the family, but now looking at the appearance of her 2 sons, she sighed and said, "Our hearts are no longer in the same place, so there is no need to force them to stay together." Bosku didn't know why and asked, "Mom, what did you say?" Mrsku's eyes passed over the people in the room one by one, and finally landed on her eldest son, in a blink of an eye, your eldest son is about to get a wife. She looked at Gu Lao-san again and warned, this wife of yours is a cheater. You should be careful in the future and don't let her empty out the house. Lu Ernie was still standing next to her. After being slapped with this label by Mrs. Gu, she immediately jumped up and said, Mom, you have to speak with your conscience. I work hard for this family. There is no credit but hard work. Mrs. Gu's killer sentence was, why can't our tofu be sold? The old lady did not take advantage of the victory, but turned to her two sons and said, Boss, you go to the Chen family tomorrow morning and invite your brother-in-law over. Second brother, you go and invite the clan leader tomorrow. Third brother, you go there Lu family, let's split up tomorrow afternoon. As soon as these words came out, it was almost the same as throwing a bomb into the room. Usually, the eldest and the third bedroom always secretly say that the second bedroom has an advantage. They feel that it is too hard for them to work in the fields all day long, and they are not satisfied with the fact that the second bedroom and the couple are clean and refreshing all day long. But in fact, the people in the two houses knew that although Gu Mingda did not work in the fields, he paid the most money to Mrs. Gu. He also bought meat every now and then, so the two houses actually took a big advantage. A person who has repeatedly failed in exams is now admitted as a scholar. Even if he fails to pass the exam in the future, having a brother who is a scholar can take advantage. More importantly, if he succeeds in the exam, the whole family will be able to prosper together. Mom, okay, why are you suddenly proposing to split up the family? My second brother has just been admitted as a scholar, and he is proposing to split up the family. It won't sound good if this spreads out, Boss Gu said with a shy face. Gu Lao-san also echoed and even pulled Gu Mingda, second brother, say something, Mom is sick and confused, we can't let the villagers laugh at us. Gu Mingda glanced at them and said, I'll go to the backyard to see Dad. When he went home earlier, Dad Gu was not at home, and then he was busy sending Mom to the town for medical treatment, and he hasn't seen his father yet. Gu Laota and Gu Lao-san could only watch Gu Mingda find an excuse to avoid this matter. Gu Laotai knew that Gu Mingda had made up his mind and there was basically no room for maneuver. She said directly to the two sons who were playing tricks, the tree is big and has branches, it's better to divide it earlier. You don't need to persuade us anymore. This family must be divided tomorrow. The eldest house is the least willing to split up. According to the custom in the countryside, the parents follow the eldest house. The old mother who is getting sick and the old father who is old and confused, who can't help with the work, this combination is unbearable for anyone. Mom, who will you and Dad go with after the split? Gu Laota asked cautiously. Although Gu Lao-san regretted the division of the family, he was much more relaxed than Gu Laota, because he was the youngest son, and no matter how the family was divided, his parents would not be given to him. Gu Laotai did not answer directly, but asked, who of you wants to support me? First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 78. Gu Lao-san simply stood aside as if it had nothing to do with him. Lu Ernie, on the other hand, was quick-witted. She reached out and pulled Gu Lao-san, dragging him outside the house and muttering. The old lady could only stare at Gu Laota. Gu Laota hesitated for a moment, and suddenly said, Mom, I'll discuss it with my wife. The disappointment in the old lady's eyes was about to overflow on the spot. Gu Laota didn't dare to look at his mother's eyes, and hurriedly ran towards his house. Gu Laota in the backyard seemed to be unaware of the huge changes that were about to happen at home. He was feeding the wild grass and insects he found in the mountains to the chickens he raised. Niu Niu leaned aside and watched Grandpa feeding the chickens obediently. Niu Niu is back. Grandpa will kill chickens for you to eat tomorrow. By then, our good baby will be able to keep his body strong and not afraid of any illness. Gu Laota said naggingly. Niu Niu raised her little face, smiled sweetly, and said, "Grandpa, Grandma, Dad, Mom, brothers and sisters all eat. Everyone can grow strong." After hearing this, Gulao Dad was so happy that his old face almost wrinkled into a chrysanthemum. "Our good boy is really filial, Grandpa is in good health, he doesn't need to eat these." Niu Niu saw Gu Mingda and immediately said excitedly, "Dad, come and see the chickens raised by Grandpa." Grandpa said, "Both big chicken legs are for me." When Gu Mingda saw the happy scene of grandparents and grandchildren, his heart also calmed down, as if the mess in the front yard didn't exist, and he walked over briskly. After staring at Gu Mingda for a long time, Gu Lao Dad said softly, "Xiao, don't you have to go to school today?" Gu Mingda was stunned. He had been away from school for more than 10 years, but his father's memory stopped in the past. "Dad, I passed the exam to become a scholar," Gu Mingda said softly. When Father Gu heard this, he was stunned for a moment, and then his cloudy eyes suddenly burst into amazing brilliance. He looked at his son as if he was looking at his most proud work. Second brother, you passed the examination to become a scholar at the age of 15. You. Father Gu couldn't help crying as he spoke. Gu Mingda recalled carefully that his younger sister, Nanan, died when he was 15 years old. Seeing her grandfather crying, Niu Niu immediately took out a handkerchief and handed it to him. The little girl didn't understand. "Grandpa, it's a good thing to pass the exam, why are you crying?" Old man Gu took the handkerchief and wiped his face with it, then hugged Niu Niu and said with a smile, "I am crying with joy. The second son passed the exam. When he passes the exam, Niu Niu will be a lady from an official family. At that time, we will find a husband who is an official for Niu Niu and make him his wife." Gu Mingda felt mixed emotions at this time. He only knew that his father valued his studies, but he didn't expect that just passing the exam would make him so happy. Recalling that he failed the exam again and again in the past, his father never showed disappointment, and he didn't know how uncomfortable he was at that time. "Second son, let's go and kowtow to your grandfather later to let him know that our Gu family finally has a scholar. I'm going to stack gold ingots now." Old man Gu excitedly arranged the follow-up of his son's passing the exam. He even ran to the house to look for incense and yellow paper. Gu Mingda looked at Gu Laodai, who came out with a basket in his hand, with a puzzled look on his face. "Strange, how come the gold ingots in the basket are all stacked, as if I stacked them? When did I stack them?" Gu Laodai has a unique way of stacking gold ingots, which is different from others. Gu Mingda only took a glance and understood that the gold ingots in the basket should have been stacked by Gu Laodai when the news of his passing the examination came back. Since Gu Laodai became confused, he has always been in a daze. Some things can be remembered firmly, but some things are refreshed every day. Gu Laodai obviously didn't care much about the stacked gold ingots. He took Gu Mingda's hand and set the time directly. "Second son, let's go to burn incense for your grandfather early tomorrow morning." Gu Mingda nodded. He looked at his father with an excited face and suddenly felt a little reluctant, but he still spoke in the end. "Dad, I want to separate from my eldest brother and third brother tomorrow." When Father Gu heard this, his expression was blank for a moment. He stared at Gu Mingda blankly. "Separate? Why separate? Only brothers can break gold with unity." Gu Mingda shook his head and tried to get his father's understanding. "Now my eldest brother and third brother have their own children and their own families. They have their own ideas. The hearts of the three of us brothers are no longer together. Does your mother agree?" Father Gu asked. Gu Mingda nodded gently. After hearing this, Father Gu lowered his head and buried his face in the shadow, making it difficult for people to see his expression. Niu noticed that Grandpa was depressed, so she leaned against him gently, as if she wanted to comfort Grandpa in this way. Father Gu stretched out his old hand and gently stroked Niu's soft hair. After a long time, he said, "It's good to separate the family. The children are grown up and have more thoughts. Gu Mingde felt a little guilty. He could have fooled around with this matter. After all, his father had been confused for many years and his mother was the head of the family now. But he still chose to tell his father about this matter solemnly. Nayuniu, do you want to eat maltos? Father Gu suddenly asked Nayuniu. Nayuniu nodded. Father Gu took the little girl's hand and walked into the house, muttering in a low voice as he walked, why are you so good, but your hearts are not together. During dinner, except for the children who were immersed in the joy of eating meat, all the adults had no appetite. That night, many people in the Gu family suffered from insomnia. Gu Mingde still felt bad when he thought of his parents' expressions during the day. He knew that his mother didn't want to split up the family, but he still acted tough. He couldn't help but start to doubt himself, thinking that if he was really filial, he should follow his mother's ideas and let these things pass. But his mother was willing to suffer, but he couldn't bear to see his mother suffer. He also didn't want his daughter to have to look at other people's faces when eating in his own home and accept the comments of the aunts. Seeing her husband tossing and turning, Zhang Yuniang couldn't help but feel distressed. When she turned her head, she saw Nayuniu, who should have been sleeping, staring at them with a pair of round eyes. Nayuniu, why don't you sleep? Zhang Yuniang asked softly. I can't sleep. Nayuniu turned left and right like Gu Mingde, and sighed again. Zhang Yuniang glanced at her daughter with a grudge and said, you are only 5 years old and you don't sleep. You won't grow tall. Nayuniu was so scared when she heard this that she immediately closed her eyes and whispered, Nayuniu must grow taller. Nayuniu can't be a dwarf. Looking at her daughter's cute appearance, Gu Mingde barely swept away the strange melancholy in his heart. The next morning, after breakfast, Gu Laode and Gu Laosan went out. Gu Mingde accompanied Gu Laode to the grave to burn incense first. Gu Laode had forgotten what he said yesterday when he got up early. He also asked Gu Mingde for a long time why he had to go to the grave when it was not a festival. After Gu Mingde explained again that he had passed the examination for a scholar, Gu Laode cried again. I am old. My eyes hurt when I cry twice. Gu Laode sighed. Gu Mingde thought to himself that if he cried for 2 days in a row, how could his eyes not be uncomfortable? Dad, let's go to see Grandpa first. Gu Mingde pulled him out of the door to prevent him from crying again when he remembered it later. After waiting for her husband to leave, Zhang Yuniang stopped Nayuniu, who wanted to go out to find food for the chickens. Nayuniu, can you help me? After hearing her mother's question, Nayuniu said without hesitation, okay, Nayuniu will definitely help me. Zhang Yuniang couldn't help laughing and asked, why don't you ask what kind of help is needed? What if it is a very difficult matter and Nayuniu can't do it? Nayuniu tilted her little head and said innocently, Nayuniu will never refuse my request. Zhang Yuniang felt as sweet as drinking honey when she heard this, and she tapped her daughter's delicate nose, little elf. According to the custom of dividing the family in the countryside, in addition to the head of the family, the daughter-in-law's family must also have someone who can take charge, which means that the division of the family has been recognized by the in-laws. The one who came to Chen Chunyua's family was her eldest brother, Chen Daju. Zhang Yuniang didn't care whether the division of the family would be a disadvantage, so she didn't ask Zhang Guangzong to come. Lu Ernie was more outrageous. The Lu family also lived in Qingshui village. There was a dispute between the two families about stealing the recipe, but Liu's mother could still visit with her 4 sons. She said that she wanted to support her daughter. When Mrs. Gu saw this, she frowned immediately, but she couldn't get angry in front of the Chen family and the clan leader. Nayuniu quickly reached out and pulled Gu Mingde's sleeve, whispering, Dad, Grandma frowned, she is unhappy. This is the task given to her by her mother. Once Grandma is unhappy, she must tell Dad immediately. Second update. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 79. Gu Mingde followed Niuniu's words and couldn't help looking at old lady Gu. Sure enough, old lady Gu, who had just been calm, now not only frowned, but also clenched her right hand, which was hanging down at her side, into a fist, as if she was enduring some great anger. At this moment, Gu Mingde suddenly became very sure of his decision to split the family. The couple in the first house were confused, and the third house had such in-laws. The third brother was so cowardly that he didn't know how much trouble he would cause his mother in the future. Gu Mingde cared most about his parents, wife, and children. At this time, the Lu family was so arrogant that they angered his mother, so he naturally wouldn't endure it in vain. He didn't want to care about the tofu shop at first, but since they were so arrogant, he didn't have to endure it anymore. Aunt Lu, your family is too serious today. Even if you come to apologize, you don't have to bring so many people, Gu Mingde said to old lady Lu. When old lady Lu heard this, the doubts in her eyes were about to solidify. What apology? Scholar, why don't I understand what you are saying? Old lady Lu brought so many sons to the house, determined to help her daughter get more things, and she had already thought of the idea of making trouble at home. There are 3 branches in the Gu family, and the first branch is the eldest branch. Chen Chunyua's family is not easy to mess with, so old lady Lu didn't intend to argue with the first branch. She focused on the second branch. Gu Mingde was famous for being generous in the village. As long as she threw a tantrum and said a few words like scholar took advantage of his brothers, she would definitely help her daughter get more property. The property her daughter got, rounded up, is not hers. Old lady Lu and the group of Lu family members who blackmailed Zhang Guangzhou before are of the same clan. They are also Lu family members, and they also bully scholars. Old lady Lu felt that it was unreasonable that others could do it but she couldn't. But at this time, Gu Mingde suddenly punched her and hit her head. Gu Mingde, who was always gentle and polite to others, suddenly sneered and said, "Aunt, your daughter stole my tofu secret recipe, you don't really think it's over, right?" Lao Nianglu immediately denied it. "No, it's not like you're the only one who knows how to make tofu, isn't there a tofu beauty in the town?" Gu Mingde asked, "So, your family stole the secret recipe from someone in the town?" "My family didn't steal the town." At this point, Lao Nianglu quickly changed her words, "My family didn't steal anyone's secret recipe, we came up with it ourselves. The tofu shop in the town just blackmailed Zhang Guangzhou, and it's not easy to mess with, so Lao Nianglu won't give people a reason to criticize." Gu Mingde said, "You thought of it yourself. How come others can't think of it but your family can? Why does it taste exactly the same as my tofu? You still say it's not stolen? Originally, my mother always advised me not to care about it. She told me that as long as your family sincerely apologizes for the sake of relatives, this matter will be over. But now seeing that your family is so unrepentant, we won't separate today. Let's go to the government office and talk about this matter. Let the county magistrate come to decide whether your family stole my family's secret recipe." Gu Mingde did what he said. He stood up on the spot and wanted to pull Lu Laoniang's eldest son to the government office. Mom! Mom! Think of a way quickly. I don't want to go to the government office. Lu Dashan, the eldest son of the Lu family, was almost crying at this time. He didn't understand how Gu Mingde, a scholar, could be so strong. He struggled for a long time but couldn't get away. The 3 words "enter the government office" are extremely lethal to ordinary people. The stories circulating in the countryside are not about the great judges who make decisions for the people, but that if you enter the government office, you will lose a layer of skin, either being beaten with a stick or losing your family. The most important thing is that Lu Dashan has been to the county before, and happened to see Gu Mingde coming out of the county government office, chatting and laughing with the head of the police next to him, and it is obvious that they are very familiar with each other. Ordinary people don't even know which direction the government office opens, but Gu Mingde has entered the government office as if he is going home. Who dares to sue such a person? Now that Gu Mingde has passed the examination for a scholar, it is obvious who the county magistrate will side with. Lu Laoniang ran over and tried to pull away the hand that Gu Mingde was holding onto his son, and shouted fiercely, "You have to go to the government office for such a small matter. Do you think you opened the government office? Don't scare my son. We are not afraid of you." Lu Laoniang couldn't understand why Gu Mingde was so difficult to deal with when they were all scholars and Zhang Guangzhong was like a fool. It's a small matter? Do you think you only stole the secret recipe? You stole tens of thousands of taels of silver from our family. This much money is enough to behead your whole family, Gu Mingde said firmly. Where did your family get tens of thousands of taels of silver? Stop talking nonsense, Lu Laoniang retorted loudly. Gu Mingde said, let me do the math for you. I don't know how much your family earns from selling tofu, but my eldest brother and third brother can each carry a load of tofu and earn at least 100 coins a day. 100 coins a day, 3 taels of silver a month, 36 taels a year, and 360 taels in 10 years. My eldest brother and third brother can sell tofu for at least 30 years with their physiques, which is more than 1,000 taels of silver. My eldest brother and third brother all have sons. Sooner or later, they will take over. Their sons will sell for another 30 years, which is more than 2,000 taels of silver. Their sons will have grandchildren, and their grandchildren will have sons, which will be passed down from generation to generation. What your family stole is not a recipe, but thousands or tens of thousands of taels of silver, which is the ability for our Gu family to make a living. 100 coins a day, this is a number that can only be obtained when the market is particularly good, but at this time, no one corrected Gu Mingde's mistake. Lu Laoniang stared at Gu Mingde in astonishment, her teeth trembling. Gu Mingde acted out a full set, pretending to be extremely angry, and pulled Lu Das hand to rush out. The more I think about it, the angrier I get. If I don't go to the government office to talk about this matter today, I can't let go of this anger. Mom, think of a way quickly. I can't enter the government office. He has someone in the government office, and we will be killed by him, Lu Das Han cried and shouted, trying to let his mother know the seriousness of the problem. Lu Laoniang looked at Lu Ernie anxiously. Seeing that Gu Mingde was really coming, Lu Ernie couldn't help getting angry, and pulled Gu Lao San. Quick, Lao San, hold my second brother, don't let my family enter the government office. Gu Lao San hesitated for a moment and was about to step forward to hold Gu Mingde. Chen Chunyua suddenly rushed out from the side and quickly gave Gu Lao San and Lu Ernie a big slap each. Who dares to stop him today? Chen Chunyua's eyes were blazing, and she looked at Gu Lao San and Lu Ernie with the same eyes as the murderer of her father. It was originally my family's money. Tens of thousands of taels of silver. All gone by you, a stinky woman. Chen Chunyua became angrier and angrier as she thought about it, and she reached out and gave Gu Lao San and his wife a slap in the face. Everyone present was stunned by this change, and Gu Lao San was also very aggrieved. He couldn't understand why Lu Ernie was the one who did the bad thing, so he was also beaten. Gu Mingde's words were meant to scare the brainless Lu family, but Chen Chunyua, who was even more brainless, believed it first. She didn't look angry at all. Brother, please help me quickly and help me send all the Lu family members to the county government. Chen Chunyua even urged Chen Daju to help send people to the government office. There was a muffled sound of thump. Laoniang Lu knelt on the ground with her legs straight. My dear nephew, I know I was wrong. Please, for the sake of my old age and confusion, please forgive us this time. Laoniang Lu burst into tears. First update. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Mu Shen. Chapter 80. Madame Lu gritted her teeth and kowtowed several times, and everyone present heard a loud muffled sound. Ms. Lu is Gu Laosan's mother-in-law, and she can be considered Gu Mingda's elder. Gu Mingda did not dare to accept her courtesy, so he stepped aside and pulled Ms. Gu over. Ms. Gu had been sulking for a long time because of the tofu thing. If someone else had stolen the formula, she would have called on her a long time ago. But it happened that it was Lu Ernie who did this, her own daughter-in-law. She was beaten and beaten at home for many days, and Lu Ernie suffered in a helpless manner. The Lu family outside directly squeezed the Gu family's tofu business. In fact, Ms. Gu's anger had been accumulated in her heart, making her feel uncomfortable. Now, as Ms. Lu knelt down like this, the anger in Ms. Gu's heart suddenly dissipated, and the depression that had tortured her for a long time completely disappeared. Sister-in-law, we are all from the same village, and we are still sons and daughters. Please spare us this time. Ms. Lu knelt down and kowtowed vigorously. Lu Ernie also helped. Ms. Gu put on her posture, and when she felt comfortable enough, Gu Mingda pretended to say, "Mom, although Aunt Lu kowtows to apologize, this matter is related to the future of our descendants after all. I have thought about it over and over again. I still think I have to go to the Yamen." After hearing this, Ms. Lu naturally cried for her father and mother again. However, Ms. Gu received Gu Mingda's hint that the mother and son did not need to communicate in advance. At this time, one was a good person and the other was a bad person. Second brother, your Aunt Lu is Xiao and Xiaobao's grandmother after all. This is really going to be sent to the Yamen. If there is a fuss, people in the village will laugh at it and say that our family is too careless. Hearing what Ms. Gu said, Ms. Lu immediately got excited and nodded vigorously, "Xiao Gong, for the sake of Xiaobao and for the sake of our Ernie giving birth to 2 children for your old Gu family, please spare us this time." Gu Laoniang took advantage of the opportunity to go down the slope, glanced at Gu Mingda, and said, "Second brother, for the sake of the children, let's forget about it." Gu Mingda looked ugly and said, "This matter can't be just let go so casually." Chen Chanhua also echoed loudly from the side, saying, "Either go to jail, or pay compensation. Give us my family's 10,000 taels of silver." When everyone present heard this, they all looked at Chen Chanhua strangely. Uncle Chen couldn't help but stretched out his hand to give her a hand and whispered advice. Chen Chanhua became anxious and said, "Why don't you let me ask for money? My second brother's account has been calculated clearly. It's 10,000 taels of silver. Why can our big house get half of it?" Ms. Lu hurriedly said, "You can't get out 10,000 taels of silver even if you sell our whole family. If you really want so much money, you might as well kill me. Isn't it okay if my family doesn't sell tofu?" Chen Chanhua immediately said viciously, "If you don't pay, you will pay with your life." As soon as these words came out, Lu Ernie was so angry that she almost fainted and hit Chen Chanhua on the spot. "If you dare to kill my mother and brother, I will kill you." Ms. Gu just wanted to see the Lu family's jokes, not her own. She frowned when she saw the 2 daughters-in-law fighting together. Niu Niu immediately reminded Gu Mingda, "Dad, Grandma is unhappy again." Gu Mingda did not expect that things would develop to this point. Now it is just the elder sister-in-law and the third younger brother and sister fighting, but if they continue to be involved, maybe the elder brother and the third younger brother will become enemies. But it was not convenient for him to come forward about the matter between the sisters-in-law, so he glanced at Zhang Yuniang. Zhang Yuniang immediately understood and yelled, "Okay. Why are you making such a fuss?" The sisters-in-law who were fighting were stunned. Ms. Gu just came to her senses and reprimanded the 2 of them as mother-in-law, "Old Gu's family is going to lose face to you. Boss and third, you still don't care." If you don't, you two will be kicked out together. Gu Boss and Gu Lao-san quickly pulled their wives back. Lu Ernie's hair was disheveled at this time, but she still cared about her parents' family. She said to Mrs. Gu, "Mom, can the tofu incident just go away? Do we really want Xiaobao to lose his grandmother and uncle?" Mrs. Gu's face darkened and she said, "The Lu family is not allowed to sell tofu anymore." Chen Chanhua was anxious, "Mom, how can you give them such a cheap price? Let them pay for it. If they don't have 10,000 taels, they have to pay at least 100 taels." When Mrs. Lu heard this, she couldn't help but said, "If my family had 100 taels of silver, my son would not be a bachelor." Lu Ernie also helped, "My parents have no money, so don't think about it." Old Lady Gu looked at Gu Mingda, who shook his head gently. The old lady naturally understood what her son meant, which was that he did not agree to ask for money. If there is not 100 taels, there are always dozens of taels. "You have been selling tofu for 2 months, haven't you made any money yet?" Chen Chanhua said angrily. Mrs. Lu said, "My tofu is so cheap, so I can't make that much money, so I bought a big stone mill and put all the money I earned into it." Chen Chanhua immediately asked for the big stone mill. When making tofu, always borrowing a grindstone from someone else's house was like having someone's neck stuck, so the Lu family simply used a stone grinder. Now that Chen Chanhua was asking for it, how could they be willing to give it to them? As the two were arguing, Gu Mingda suddenly said, "We don't want your family to lose money, and we don't want your family's stone mill." His second uncle, Chen Chanhua, couldn't help but scream. Gu Mingda didn't look at her, but looked at Mrs. Lu and said, "I want your 4 sons to run around the village 3 times tomorrow, shouting while running, saying that you know you are wrong and will never steal other people's secret recipes again." Compared with going to the yamen or losing money and things, this plan only hurts face. Although the 4 sons were reluctant, Mrs. Lu agreed immediately. After the Lu family's affairs were settled, Gu Mingda turned around, cupped his hands towards the head of the Gu family, and said, "Uncle, there are many things in the family that make you laugh." Upon hearing this, Patriarch Gu waved his hands and said with approval, "Xiao, you handled this matter very well. We are all relatives. If we have to go to the yamen, you will get a reputation for being mean." After the family scandal is dealt with, the next step is the main event of family separation. Mrs. Lu was standing there with her 4 sons, but Gu Mingda asked meaningfully, "Is the rule of the Lu family that 5 people should take charge of the affairs together?" When Mrs. Lu heard this, she couldn't help but shudder when she thought of how miserable she had been treated by Gu Mingda. Only her eldest son, Lu Das Han, was left behind, and she took the remaining 3 sons and ran out. No matter what Lu Ernie's eyes suggested, she no longer dared to think of any idea of sharing more family wealth from the Gu family's second wife. After leaving the gate of the Gu family, Lu Yaoer, who had not yet married, asked eagerly, "Mom, are we really going to stop doing the tofu business? Will the stone mill be bought in vain? When can I save enough money to marry a wife?" Mrs. Lu had a gloomy face and said, "Do it, why don't you do it? Aren't you afraid of entering the yamen anymore? Aren't you afraid of Gu Laoer?" Lu Sainer asked cautiously. Madame Lu said, "Gu Laoer is indeed capable, but I don't believe he stays in the village every day." After hearing this, the 3 sons suddenly felt that it made sense. Mrs. Lu said angrily, "They are all in the tofu business. Why can the old Gu family earn 100 cash a day, while my family only earns 20 or 30 cash? We will also raise the price later." The Gu family behind them had already begun to fight. Mrs. Gu originally thought that she and her husband would be pushed around by the boss and the 3rd child, but she didn't expect that after her sons went back to the room to discuss it all night, she would become the favorite. "Boss Gu, Mom, you will live with us from now on." Gu Lao-san was also very anxious, "Mom, Ernie and I really want to support you in your old age." You can live with us from now on. Second update.